Hey, everybody, this is Mary Grothy, and you're tuning in to my podcast, Destination Remarkable, the show where I chat about my journey through life from childhood to founding 3 companies to my venture launching 2 books with Forbes. Every week, I'll dive in and unveil the highs, the lows, and even the nitty-gritty details of my journey. It's raw, it's real. Let's get started. Hey, Destination Remarkable, I'm Mary Grothy, and welcome to today's episode. I have a topic called toxic empathy, and we're going to dive deep into what I think the definition of that is. I didn't do any research on this beforehand. I just had an aha moment looking in reflection of how I've dealt with empathy in my life, because empathy is not a bad trait. I'm a CEO, I'm a leader, I'm a wife, a mom, and I think being an empathetic leader is important, but I think there's a level of empathy where it turns toxic, at least for me specifically. I've had toxic empathy, especially in this last season of my life as a CEO. It took me down to zero. It drained me. It was not good. So let's talk about toxic empathy. I'll start by sharing with you just a little bit more about my childhood. You're going to get a lot of these stories in our time together in these episodes, but I want to tell you specifically where I think my empathetic traits were born, and it came from being a child of an alcoholic parent. My mom was a crazy alcoholic. I mean, I can't even begin to tell you how bad her drinking habits were. She would start in the morning with a cup of coffee that she would put cream in there. So it had, that look like a light brown. And then she'd switch out after a couple of cups of coffee to a White Russian. And if you're not familiar with what a White Russian is, it's vodka, Kahlua, Bailey's, and cream. Or not Bailey's, vodka, Kahlua. Kahlua is the cream, right? Or is that black? I don't know. I don't really drink White Russians, but it's definitely vodka, Kahlua, potentially Bailey's, or maybe it's just vodka, Kahlua, and cream. Somebody who's a bartender could drop in the comments and tell me how to make a White Russian. Not that I need to know because I don't drink. But on that note, she would switch over. And so in the coffee cup, it looked the same. And you'd only be able to tell if she had switched from coffee to a White Russian by hearing the ice clink in the mug, or you could, and she would set it down. You could look in there and see if you could see any ice. But this woman, in her drunken stupor every single day, was just unbearable to be around. She was such a monster. She hated everything and everyone. She hated her life. She hated everyone in it. Her lens, her filter was so negative, so woe is me. Everyone was out to get her. And every story she would tell, it was always about how everyone was out to get her. And she would twist every story. It was always about her. You couldn't ever hear her tell a story about anything or anyone that didn't quickly transition into making it about her and how awful her life is and how just everybody was out to ruin her. So as a child, especially as a little girl, I wanted to be loved, and I wanted to feel that from my parents, specifically my mom. I wanted a day where she didn't yell at me. I wanted a day where I seemingly wasn't making her life worse. I felt like a nuisance. I felt like I was in the way. I felt like I always did everything wrong, and I never brought value into her life. And as a human, that's not how we are wired. Like, we're not created that way. Children crave acceptance and love and belonging, especially from their parents. And I just remember wanting to do whatever I possibly could for her to acknowledge me and love me. So from an empathetic state, very early in my life, I realized some things that I do produce a better result with her, and some things I do produce a worse result. Although as a child of an alcoholic parent, the rules would often change. So some days the thing that I did that was good, the next day all of a sudden it's bad and it's the wrong thing, which is very confusing because I'd think, oh wait, I'll do that thing again because she liked it. And then as a young little girl, I'd go do that same thing with so much hope and promise, like my mom's going to like me today because I'm going to do that good thing that I did yesterday. And then today, all of a sudden it's bad, and it would just break my heart. So I learned from an emotional intelligence standpoint, or EQ, one of those traits is empathy. And the difference between empathy and sympathy is sympathy, you feel sympathetic for someone. So you're honoring how they feel, but you're not taking it on. You're not bearing the weight. You're not stepping into their shoes. You're not absorbing it and taking and sharing in the emotional stress and strain and trying to do something about it. Empathy is where, when you're in that empathetic state, like you really just absorb what that person is feeling. And sympathy is like, oh, I'm sorry that you're going through that. Like you acknowledge the emotional state that the person is in, but there's no like action after that. Like, I'm so sorry for your loss. An empathetic state, you're so sorry for this person's loss that you're experiencing the grief with them and you're so emotionally invested and you want to then take action, whether it's through words or actually acts of service for them. And you're trying to do things to influence around them. You want to get into conversation. You want to make their day better. And you're really taking on the responsibility of producing a better outcome for that person. So empathy really takes sympathy and puts it into action. But there's a level to where that's no longer healthy. And that's where it turns toxic. And so for me, with my mom, like I just wanted to take it to the nth degree to try to make her life better. And so I would remember just trying to go so far above and beyond and do anything that I could to make her happy. And I would often console her and sit with her and be with her and listen to her stories and take the wrath. And as I became older, I just remembered thinking, like, how can someone's life seriously be so awful? Like I would go through the same experiences as her. So we'd share in the same situation and her outlook was so negative and so toxic and so bad. And it's like, I just went through the same situation that you did. And I don't feel any of those things. And I don't think that that was their intention. And she would twist and turns everyone's words and became so manipulative around situations. And I think that she was just so broken on the inside. And she also grew up in an environment of alcohol and abuse. And I know like she became pregnant at 17 out just dating someone. And I can only imagine the wrath she dealt with from her mom because that was late 60s. So I'm sure like back then, it was just so frowned upon and they immediately had to get married. And she ended up having a second child 4 years later and then ended up divorcing that first husband. But I can't imagine what my mom went through being in her childhood in the same house of abuse and alcoholism. And then she goes and how can you get pregnant at 17? I struggled becoming pregnant at 32. I still had so much growing up to do. I cannot imagine being 17. I was such a child at 17 and I can't imagine what it would have been like conceiving a baby and being expected to parent that baby. I struggled at 32. How I would have done that at 17, I don't know. So, I am empathetic to my mom's situation. And then for her to grow up without support from her parents and her mom was a witch and a half. That woman was nasty. I did not have a relationship with my mom's mom, my grandma. She was Miss Society. She wore pink suits and her pearls and buttoned up from head to toe, high heels and suits every day, even if she was sitting at home. She was one of those pioneers in like the women revolution. And she was, working within her city and like those high class society clubs and whatever else, like Stepford Wives. And my grandma, like if you were not buttoned up and part of society and spoke perfectly and fully presentable at all times and modest and this, that, and the other, like you were a nobody to her and you were just throwing your life away. So if she was treating her granddaughter that way, I cannot even imagine how my mom was raised. And so it's not a surprise to me, right, that my mom, by the time she has me, she's remarried to my dad and she's adopted alcohol as a way of life and was dealing with her own trauma from her own childhood, but she never had an opportunity to heal. And so she's bringing this in to now being a mom to me. By the way, my oldest two sisters, my half sisters, like their upbringing was far worse than mine. Just so we're super clear. They dealt with not only that, but they dealt with my dad is not a good person. So there was even more abuse in the household. And So here we are, like in such a broken home. And all I want to do is try to make anybody in this family happy because everyone hated their lives. Everybody was negative. Everyone was mean. Everyone was woe is me. I lived in a house where my parents both smoked. The lace curtains had turned like yellow and orange from the tar. And you could, in fact, see tar like in the wallpaper, like dripping. It was the dirtiest house with pets that went to the bathroom all over the house and like cats included, which if you ever smelled the cat pee on the carpet, like so bad, you guys. It's not good. It's awful. Dog, cats, everything, everywhere. My mom had allergies. She'd blow her nose and she would just stack it in places like she wouldn't throw it away. So in my mom's common sitting spots, it was like a snowdrift of used tissues. Just like so gross. Anywho, I was the kid that lived in the dirty house. So everything in my childhood was just like dark, scary, gross, broken, traumatic, abusive. Like it was just such a bad environment. And so when I think about empathy, I really feel that when God created me, like he created me with so much light just in me from when I was a child. Like I felt very different from anyone else in my family. I always felt that light shining through me. And I feel like that hope, even though I didn't know who he was and I didn't know anything about Christianity when I was growing up, I just could always feel like I'm different from these people. I was created differently. And I feel like I just had the light built in me from birth, from an early age. And so I felt it was upon me to try to make everyone's life better within my family. I wanted to be the light to them. I wanted to be the hope. I wanted to be this optimistic, bright, anything to break through the darkness that we had inside of those four walls of our house. And so with my mom specifically, I took it upon myself from a very early age to do anything that I could to try to make her happier. And I started to notice that typically through performance is where I could see a glimpse of love from her, or I would get an acknowledgement and it would make her happy. So that's like where the toxic trait of like performance-based love came from. Like, oh, if I do this, then you will love me. And that's not healthy. So that's where I just developed this empathetic side of me, wanting to make her life better. Well, that became part of my DNA and my belief system of who I was. And I had moments of wins where I was able to make people's lives better in my family. I detail so much of this in my book, FYI. There are unbelievable stories that I share of the lengths that I went to try to save my family. It's crazy. Moving on. So as a CEO, I have carried this empathetic nature of myself into my work. I feel greatly responsible for the people who work in my company. I feel like they have options. They could work in a dozen different places, potentially even make more money, but they choose to be here. And that means a lot to me. So I have this feeling of reciprocity that if they're choosing to be here and they work so hard, our tagline, do remarkable work. They work so hard. They're passionate, they're driven, they're smart, but they put a lot on the line in sacrifice to work for our clients and to be great humans in the process. And so I feel indebted to that. And I want to do whatever I can to make their lives better. Well, there's a certain line like to draw in the sand of what I need to be doing as a CEO versus crossing that line and stepping into toxic empathy where I am so focused on their well-being and wanting their lives to be so amazing because I've been in it that I take on the stress and pressure and the emotional weight of doing everything I possibly can for them to have a better life. And I have finally been able to reflect and acknowledge that that's actually not a good trait. And when I look at what happened in our company in 2021, so it was a little bit easier to be an empathetic leader when you only have 6 people. The list is a lot smaller. So my work in 2020 and 2019, let me back up. I don't know years. This is one of the not good sides of me is my life sometimes. And I think back, it's just such a blur. I'm like, what year was that? So I started the business end of 2017, started to get team members in 2018. So in 2018 and 2019, we had 6 employees or less. But then as we got into 2020, I think we kept that year at 9 or 10 employees. And it was just so much easier in those first 3 years to genuinely care about them and to care about their families, their kids, their spouses, their well-being, and their success. And also like caring for them from the state of ensuring they had career progression and they could increase their income and have a better wage and better life. All those things are really important to me. But in 2021, when we doubled in size, I mean, at our peak, we had 28 team members. And the hardest part for me was figuring out how to care for 28 people at the same level that I was caring for 9 or 10. And it took everything out of me. Like, it was so hard to be at this place where I look back at 2021 and I'm a high performer. I'm an overachiever. I'm a type A. I have a big capacity, so I can take on a lot. It takes a lot to burn me out and run me into the ground, especially to the point of a rock bottom, a mental breakdown. And I look back now that every day that I'm out of that funk that I was in, I have better hindsight and greater reflection. And what killed me that year was believing that everyone's success, not just in their profession and their seat, but as a person, was dependent on me. And I would be kept up at night, worrying, playing back the tapes from the day, being concerned about every word that came out of my mouth, every email that I sent, every action that I took, questioning, did I honor everyone? Did I make sure everyone was taken care of? Did everyone get everything that they needed? Was I present in every meeting? Did I do everything I possibly could to serve all of these people to the highest level that I could? And the awakening for me now, being past this, is realizing that was never my responsibility. Like, people need to own their own stuff. They need to own their own success. They need to own how they show up to work. They need to own how they ask questions. They need to own their own career. Like, yes, as a CEO and as a leader, I get to set the tone for the culture. I get to make sure that our middle management layer is trained and ready to serve those people. I can make sure that we have a really good reputation, that we're growing, that we have a good funnel so that we can stay in business and pay the bills. I can make sure that I'm responsible in how we report to the IRS and file taxes and like all the back end stuff that people don't know. Like, I know people have zero idea what it takes until you run the company. Like, you don't know all the stuff that happens behind the scenes. That in itself is enough. Ensuring that the company is healthy financially, that the numbers are good, the reputation is good, the business model is good. I mean, that's enough to provide learning opportunities, to create a calm and loving culture, to have very strong and true core values, and to make sure that they're enforced. It's enough to show up powerfully in team meetings and being present in client meetings, one-on-ones. All of that is enough. And I was taking it to a level that was so unhealthy, and it truly cost me everything in my well-being. I had an executive team that I was so proud of. At one point, we had 5 executives, and these are me and 4 others. These 4 people were so passionate about being here, and they treated this company like it was theirs. They sacrificed greatly for the success of everyone here. And to the level that they were sacrificing to perform, it only increased that rule of reciprocity, where I felt like every further inch that they went, I needed to go an extra inch for them. And so I started doing things like wanting this to be the best role they've ever had. So I'm adopting their vision. I'm adopting what they want. I'm adopting every time they had feedback from the field of this is broken, this is wrong. I'm like, okay, let's fix it. I'll do whatever it takes to fix it. Like I stopped leading and I became a submissive servant to everything that I thought they needed, rather than staying strong in my seat as a leader and leading and taking the data, evaluating it with a filter, doing my own research and coming back and saying, I understand that this is a situation that we need to address. I've done my own research. Like I never said no to them. I never pushed back. I just wanted them to be so happy. And I thought that they would be so happy working here if I just said yes to everything that they wanted. Next thing I know, like in good intention, they were asking for things, right? But none of them had ever been an executive. So we're clear. This was the first time for all of us. And so it was the blind leading the blind. And we're learning as we went. And I was the smartest, like, I shouldn't say that's not the smartest person in the room, but I was the most experienced in the room. And I was not trusting my gut or intuition because I was fearful that I would say no to something that they wanted and then they wouldn't want to be here anymore. So I was leading from a place of fear, just like I was as a child. There are so many times that I should have stood up to my mom. She was a nasty woman and she did a lot of really mean, nasty, wrong things to a lot of people in our family, in the community, to our friends. And there are so many times that I could have stood up, spoken up, and redirected my mom or presented maybe an alternate way of doing things. But I had the fear inside of me that I could never stand up to her. And in fact, so we're clear on how this story goes. The one and only time I ever stood up to my mom, the one and only time was when my grandmother passed away when I was 28. And that was the end forever of the relationship with my family. The first time I finally spoke up about her wrongdoings, I was months later cut out of the family entirely. So my intuition was correct. The wrath of Andrea was real. And even though my mom had adopted sobriety at that point in my life, which I'm proud of her for doing that, the mental illness was so bad. You took the alcohol away from her, but she was still so mentally unwell. And those demons that haunt her, they never went away. The alcohol went away, but the damage was done. And I was right. And that led to being kicked out, I guess, of my family. And for that, that's okay. You know, it was hard at the time, but like I'm super thankful that I'm not a part of it anymore. And I've been able to rebuild my life and I don't have to be around that toxicity and whatnot. So I didn't stand up. So that was the belief system. That's what was ingrained in my head was if you stand up and speak up to somebody, they're going to cut you out, run away, shut out. You'll never have them again. And these people were important to me. So as a leader, I was scared to tell them, hey, this company is going down a different path. You know, hey, the vision seems far off. So what did I do? I stepped away and I just let them run it. And I went off and had a mental breakdown. And instead of confronting the situation, because I was so scared, they wouldn't like me, they would quit, I would hurt their feelings, I would not make them feel well. Like, holy smokes, what a weakness on my side and a disservice to them. So we had 2 remaining executives, you know, and their heart was all in, all in. In fact, I've had an opportunity to look in some files recently of some work, future planning that they were doing for the company. And I'm so impressed. They loved this company. They loved me and our team. And they fought to the very end to create a vision, a strategy, to take this company to the next level. And for that, I honor them and I'm so thankful for them that they shared in the heart for this business and they shared in the heart for me. And my biggest regret is that I wasn't brave enough to say the things that should have been said months prior, to have the conversations that should have been had. And if they listen to this, if you're listening to this, I'm sorry. But I'm really grateful that I had them while I had them, because God doesn't make mistakes. This is my life for a reason. Now I have this platform through Forbes and these podcasts and the social media. And I'm hoping that this story is inspiring for other leaders who also struggle with toxic empathy or fear of confrontation and speaking up. And I'm struggling to wrap this to a close because my heart is just like, it's just on fire right now, just in reflection. I still want everyone else's life to be better because I'm in it. I don't think that's ever going to go away. God created me so unique, powerfully in his image. I am a luminous being. I am highly optimistic. I'm still just a little girl at heart. I have so much optimism and love for people and such a desire to make an impact in this world. And I know that God only is going to take me through what he's going to use. And I know that the executives that I had the privilege of working with for a season, I'm so grateful that God put them in my life and I got to learn from it. I'll champion them forever. They know they can ask me for anything. I will do anything for them so that they can continue to flourish in their careers and their lives, professionally and personally. But my hope is that this story today on toxic empathy is something that you can take with you and move you somehow in your life. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you're interested in connecting with me, you can find me, Mary Grothe, spelled Grothe, on LinkedIn, Twitter, TikTok, or Instagram.